Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to be taking you through a sketch I did last summer on Georgian Bay, sketching this dock and boat on location. And so I'm going to be taking you through in pretty close to real time the full process of this sketch slash painting. So like usual, I start with pencil, get my construction lines down, compose the scene, and then I go over and add more detail in my fountain pen. So I'm using a waterproof ink and then letting it dry for a bit. This particular ink dries very quickly, so I don't have to wait too long before I can jump right into watercolors. The ink, if you're wondering, is a platinum carbon ink. And so, yeah, you can see very quickly, got the scene all laid out, and now I'm going to start with my watercolor layers. And at this time I was really trying to just still experiment, understand the different techniques to applying watercolor. So I'm working through gradients. I believe the page was dry, so I'm working on dry paper and then trying to evenly get the sky with a lot of ink, or pigment rather, at the top, and then gradually getting lighter as we get towards the horizon. And so I'm just sort of experimenting, trying to capture the atmosphere of the clouds, not necessarily represent the clouds accurately. So I'm just splashing water while the paint and pigment is still wet, splashing some water on to give a more atmospheric effect. And so that was the first gradient of the sky, and now I'm going to do the water itself. It's a similar technique, starting with heavy pigment at the top and then gradually working to more watery as we get to the horizon. I'm using a different paintbrush here. This is I think it's a number 6 round brush, whereas I used that flat brush for the sky. And this worked out nicely. I had a relatively dry-ish brush, and then I'm leaving those white streaks as highlights in the water. And the sky did change out the course of this painting. It was quite cloudy when I started, and by the end it was actually quite sunny. You're going to see the shadows change from soft lighting to a hard shadow with my hand on the page when the sun comes out. And I decided to add more saturation in the bottom right corner when the painting's wrapped or rotated right side up. In hindsight, I don't know that I would have done this, but it seemed to be the right decision at the time. I wanted a higher saturation at the foreground of the image. but it doesn't work as well, this gradient effect, when it's not new paper. I always find it difficult adding washes on top of a wash that's already there. And so the sky and water's in place, and now I'm just using a buff, braiding right from the palette almost onto the page, just trying to punch in some saturation onto the paper. I kind of enjoy doing granite because it's relatively abstract. Like you can kind of get the paper wet and then start pushing pigment into it, and I really like how the colors react. I'm interested in how this brush makes marks too, so I kind of just push in some pigment and let it disperse into the wet paper. I think it works quite well for granite. And it's the lichen that grows on the granite that has these really vibrant colors. In addition to the rock itself, the rock has, these pinks, but then the orange and the greens of the lichen is really vibrant. And I think the choice of color that I used for the sky made this a bit more surreal than it actually is. Maybe surreal is not quite the quality that I'm looking for, but it sort of changed the feel of the painting, that's for sure. So I was relatively happy with how the mark making and painting went at the granite and the skies, and I wanted to push in some deeper shadows at the shoreline, under the dock, and then a little bit of the islands beyond. And so I'm kind of using the shape of the flat brush here to make marks. I'm kind of just tapping the brush because I find gives more interesting textures than if I try to paint or move to make shapes. I like the way watercolor is its own thing. When you add water, mixing pigments together, and how it interacts with the page, I find very interesting. And then also how to make marks on that page. I find pushing or using the medium can be more interesting than trying to paint it. I think it was more successful in the trees on this island. I'm sort of just pressing the brush gently down, and it's giving nice marks that are suggestive of trees. And so we're getting into the final touches of this particular painting. Just adding some details to the boat and a couple more shadows. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for following along. Please give a like and subscribe. It really helps me keep going, and I'll see you in the next one.